What's up, everybody? My name is Indy, and the gentleman next to me is Jay Powell. It depends. And welcome to Indie Game Business. Today we've got Klaas from Representing Games, and we're talking about preparing for a conference. Is there a conference coming up? Conference when looking for a publisher. Is there some kind of conference coming up?
Could be.
Maybe. I want to thank our sponsor, Tripwire Presents. And we do have that Indie Game Business Conference coming up here in a couple weeks.
Klaas's boss is like messaging me in the middle of all this right as we go live. So
Klaas's boss?
Bear with me for a second.
Typical Fedor. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Conference coming up 8th and 9th of I was going to say December, March. It's been one of those weeks. And we've already got like a wonderful group of publishers and developers that are going to be there. So if you want to pitch before GDC to open up your GDC calendar a little bit, or you want to just pitch because you don't want to go to GDC or you can't get to GDC, it's all there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so welcome.
See, Fedor threw off my entire first start here.
Why would you do that, boss?
We have my good friend Klaas, who I like to refer to as Patient Zero, because every time I go to a conference with him, I get sick. And if I'm not with him, I come home fine. So, Klaas, tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry, and then walk us through what you do, what you've done in your career so far.
Yeah.
Tell them what you do now.
All right. Well, I would say I would start with the fact that I'm Klaas. I'm from the Netherlands, by the way. I started my professional career as a, officer, sort of, in the Royal Military Academy, where I spent 4 years trying to become an officer in the Dutch infantry. But it took me 4 years to realize that wasn't what I wanted to be in the end. So
I want to know how you become sort of an officer.
Well, basically, I was almost there. And that's when I decided I didn't want to be it anymore. So basically, you go up in the ranks when you are at the Royal Military Academy, and then once you are finished, you are officially an officer, no longer like a officer cadet, you call that. So that's when you turn into a real officer. So I wasn't a real officer yet. Let's put it that way. And then I decided I want to do something else, but I didn't know what. So I didn't know what role would fit me. So I thought, okay, what do I really like in life? And that's video games. I always watched the conference back in the day, the E3s, you know it. And I decided to put my next career in that direction and just figure out where I would end up. So I did basically everything in after that, trying to figure out how to get there. I did another bachelor in marketing, sales, and account management, and I did an internship at the Dutch Game Garden in the Netherlands, which is like an incubator, where I did a role related to also business development. And I did my own minor entrepreneurship, where I started my own company as an agent, which, after 6 months, I realized, okay, this is not something I want to do with these kind of people, but I learned a lot, met a lot of interesting people. And that's when I also got in contact with Fedor, the boss that just interrupted us. And he basically reached out to me, hey, we need some help over here at Me to Match. And Me to Match asked me to join in. And that's when I started working at Me to Match. Back then, there was no Representing Games yet. And Representing Games is a company born out of Me to Match. So yeah, that's where my professional career would really have started, I would say, in the video games industry. Yeah, that's about it.
All right, and so for everyone, what do you do now?
What do I do now? Yeah.
Why are you qualified to come on here and answer questions?
Yeah. So basically, what do we do now is mostly we are like the colleague that you might need in terms of you might need some help with finding publishers, finding conferences, working on your pitch deck, working on your materials, and you might need some help doing the legwork, doing that, or reaching out to the right people in that case. So we work mostly we are an agent. As you can imagine, with Me to Match, I think most people are familiar with Me to Match. We have been working with events for the past 14 years. We knew a lot of interesting people there, and people started reaching out to us with the question like, hey, you seem to be well connected. I need some help with finding the right connections. And that's basically the side activity that started Representing Games. And last year, we rebranded that to that new brand, Representing Games, which is now a standalone thing. where we either work directly with developers, help them with finding publishers and investors, but ahead of that process, we help them with improving on their pitch materials and provide our business perspective and our market knowledge about their game. We also work with some publishers where we work on the scouting side, or help them with finding like an external development company that can help them with making a sequel of a game they own. Or we work with a lot of governments and acceleration programs where we basically do what we do with developers, but more in like a program kind of thing where we provide like lectures and one-on-one sessions and then set up a whole connection program, sometimes standalone, sometimes ahead of a big event that's coming up. But in the shortest, we are like a connection focused agency where we help people bring A and B together and join in your company as sort of a colleague to do the legwork for you. Where you might need some help, outside help, either because you don't have the right connections, or maybe it's because you don't have the time. It can be all kinds of reasons, but that's more or less what we do.
All right. So now that everything has gotten back into the swing of live events, for better or for worse, the biggest question between all the online events and all the offline live events, because there's tons of them back in the mix now, is which one should I go to? So when it comes to deciding and choosing between all the different options out there, how should a developer go about, figuring out which one to do?
Well, I think assuming that money and time are limited things, right? So I would focus on first of all, look at what is your current goal when you would go to an event. If it's mostly about, okay, do you think you are really ready to potentially hunt that deal down, then definitely focus on finding the place where most of the potential publishers and investors might be. But if you are more also oriented at looking at, okay, I want to gather feedback, I want to build relations, then maybe start at a smaller one. But in general, I would say if the best thing to do is to go to on-site events, definitely. But the good thing about online events is that you can do them all the time. You can do them while you're doing other stuff during the day as well. So if your time is limited and maybe your schedule is limited in terms of the first other event that might come up is hard to reach out to go to, maybe an online event might be the right choice for you, especially in a case like GDC that's coming up. I would definitely say go to, like, it's not to do sales for you, Jay, but definitely go to an IGBS upcoming event, simply to use it as a practice. Maybe already meet some people there that you then can personally meet and go to the next step with in GDC. So I would say go to the big events mostly to find a quantity of people to speak with. But if you really want to build relationships, go to the smaller events, but still the on-site events. That's more or less.
Yeah, and that's definitely. And the other thing is GDC is so expensive. I mean, we ran the numbers several years ago, pre-COVID. And if you were to go and get the full access pass, you could go to all the conferences, all the sessions, and flights to San Francisco, and hotels, and eating there, where bacon and eggs for breakfast is going to cost you $15. You're looking at it close to 10 grand, and so it gets very, very expensive. But yeah, Klaas is right. I mean, the bigger ones, everybody's going to be there, but you're also got to keep in mind that some of these people and the publishers and the scouts are looking at a new game every half hour for 5 days straight.
Definitely.
So,
I don't think you will always get their full attention, and
no,
especially if you are at a stage where you might be one of those games that they are hesitant to accept a meeting from, then they might say no at a GDC, but they might say yes at the smaller conference when they have a bit more time. So that's the perfect place to actually build that relationship with them and to figure out, to gather feedback from them. While at GDC, you probably have to take into account that you only have like effectively 15 minutes with them or something like that. So there's very little time to actually build that relationship. Maybe later during the day if you run across them during the whole week. But yeah, in general, GDC is about quantity, I would say.
And it's about being seen and socializing and that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's very, very easy to get your feet wet, test out your pitch, do that sort of stuff in a online event, then go to GDC. But the other side of it is, the regional size events are perfect. It's like, I love going to like Nordic and some of the other like mid-size events, because yes, there's a lot of people there, but it's also not so many people there that you're running all over downtown San Francisco trying to find your next meeting. What about when it comes to B2B conferences like GDC and Gamescom versus B2C, where like a PAX or the other side of Gamescom.
Mhm.
Where should you put your priorities on that sort of stuff?
Well, I would say that if you are mainly looking to gather feedback, and you want to gather feedback or test out if people like your game at all, maybe that's the place to go to, like a more consumer focused event. But if you go to a consumer focused event, yes, there will be publishers, but you will be standing there hope to in the hope that they will basically show up to you to see if they want to meet or are interested in your game at all. But if you really are looking for a publisher and that might be your focus, then I would recommend going to a more business focused event that actually has like a whole platform surrounding it and to set up meetings easily with each other. PAX is great. I always hear great stories from publishers that they really like to go to PAX. But from the developer's perspective, and I don't have any personal experience, but I would say you're quite unsure there, that you are just waiting all day in the hope that someone shows up. That's what it feels like from the outside at least.
I got it. All right, so you've decided what conference you're going to. We've
Mhm.
obviously just released our 2023 publisher list. So that's got 500 some publishers in it, broken down by
Yeah.
platform. So if you don't have that yet, go get it. It's at either indiegame.business or powellgroupconsulting.com. How do you even start going and looking at 500 some plus publishers and figuring out who to, get a meeting with?
Well, I think there are two approaches you can take that for that. I would say there is the first approach is make a list of the priority targets that you have in mind. So basically, take a look at the genre you're in. Take a look at similar games on other aspects than genre. Take a look at the budget range you're in. Take a look at the what how do you call that? The type of game in terms of multiplayer, single player, stuff like that. Basically, figure out what games are more or less similar or have other similarities than your game, and figure out if there are any publishers there that you think seem to be well fitting with what you made. So simply look up games on Steam, look at games on other stores, find out who published them, and take a look. And then from the other way around, you can take a look at your list of publishers or other places where you can find publishers and chase it from the other way back to figure out, okay, what did they make? Is that something that could potentially fit with me? So that's, I think, the way to make your priority list. But outside of that, we personally always recommend be open to everyone. So there are some blockers, though. I would say if you are developing for PC console, don't reach out to a mobile publisher. If you're primarily focused on making premium games, don't reach out to a free-to-play focused publisher. And if you're primarily focused on, like, okay, let's say you're making a wholesome game, don't reach out to a publisher that's making horror games. But outside of that, I would say most of the time you can basically try out everyone that you can find, and the way to find them is your list. The way to find them is the meet to match platform that we are working on, that basically log into an event, find if it's some sort of B2B component, you can just figure out who is attending a certain event and check what they're making, check what they're looking for, and figure out if there might be a fit. So basically, first make your list of priorities, and then if you have time left, figure out who you can with who else you can basically fill in the spots, I would say. It doesn't have to be that hard, but if you still need some outside help, then there's always an agency that might be able to help you with it.
So the meet to match system goes a step further than what we do on the list, because when you go into that, you can easily just pull up and say, if you need $1 million for your project, the publishers that are listed in there will say we're only funding up to 600,000 or 700,000. So it's another way to hone down your list. But on the flip side as well, it's a lot easier to just send a simple request to a publisher that way through the system and either get a yes or a no. If you get a no, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, why not
that's
ask
just
them,
helping
right?
you narrow down what you've got so far.
So yeah, I always think, like, okay, maybe unless there's like a very specific reason to not want to meet with a publisher, I would say why not try it out? Just and if you still have 30 minutes left somewhere in the conference, figure out if there might be worth your time. Just have a short conversation with them. They might not be useful for your current project, but they might be for your next one, right? So I definitely would say just have as many meetings as you can, while of course make sure that you still have some time for yourself to basically eat something during the day, have a drink, or just clear your mind or stuff like that. But otherwise, just meet. I would say.
Right. So, what should you go about if the publishers aren't exactly the specific ones that you're looking for? Should you be also looking around? It's like, okay, this one might be an option, or this one might
Hmm.
not be an option.
So sorry. So what was your question again? So if you, there was also a question on screen, so it ran in between each other. Sorry.
Oh, so if you, yeah, don't worry about the question on the screen. Dan will take care of that. So if you are looking at the publishers and
Yeah.
you're either on our list or the meet to match system,
Hmm.
and the publisher's not an exact fit,
Yeah.
how far away, from a good fit should you be looking? We talk about genre adjacent all the time, but
Yeah. Well, I would say just start with the most perfect fit, and then basically go wider and wider until you're out of time or slots to fill. But I wouldn't like I mentioned. I think that the four biggest parts for me are to basically not make it worth your time at all. If it's like the platforms are not, they never published anything on your platform, so they're probably not interested in it, and they are not worth your time as well. It's a two-way thing, right? So the platform is one. If the budgets they're interested in, and they don't mention that in your list, maybe, but often they mention it on a meet to match platform. If that's too far off from what you are making, then probably it's either they are only interested in very big budget things or in smaller things than you are making. So that's probably not worth anyone's time. Like I mentioned, business model is very important. Free to play publishers and non free to play publishers tend to be split. And like I mentioned, if there is like a very thematic publisher that's very much into horror, very much into wholesome games, very much into games with with a message in there, something like that. If they really clearly mention that in their profile, then probably it's not worth reaching out either, because that will only like make them think, okay, why they didn't do any research at all? Why is this guy reaching out to me? But outside of that, I would say start with the best fit and then just go wider.
all right. So let's say you're not in the meet to match platform, or you're going to somewhere, and like Dice is a good example.
Yeah.
Next week, Dice apparently has a meeting system. I've never used it, but it's also $3,000 to get a ticket to go to it. How do you go about finding and reaching out to publishers if you're not already in a meeting system?
Yeah. So basically, your list is a good starting point. Store pages are a good starting point. Just use your colleagues as well. Use industry friends. Use people you know. Ask them around. And once you have established like a list of publishers to reach out to, I would basically look up Twitter, look up LinkedIn. Definitely recommend LinkedIn here. And figure out if you can find a contact. First, most of the publishers would have like a general contact email on their website as well. But if you can find a specific person that's like called business developer or a scout or head of content or stuff like that, they probably are the right person to reach out to instead of the more general pitching email address where you might end up on a big pile. So it's all about figuring out their emails or their LinkedIn profiles or their Twitter DM places and reaching out to those specific channels. For us, it's a bit easier because we have so many years of experience that we have like a whole CRM system with everyone in there. But everyone needs to build one from the start, of course, and that's the way you should do it. And there are all kinds of tools to figure out how to reach out better if you might find a profile but you can't find, I don't know, their LinkedIn or find their email address or whatsoever. There are tools to help out with that.
Like which ones?
I don't know, Rocket Reach, but that's expensive. A Get Prospect provides like 800 free emails a month. So there are a lot of those similar tools, I would say, that just Google Email Finder and you will find something.
I think the one that we've used in the past is Foxit or something to
Okay,
that effect.
yeah.
But we've also used Mail Tester. Mail Tester is good if you think you know the right email address, but not quite. That's when that one gets a little more useful. All right. So good question, since we're talking about reaching out to publishers anyway. From General Soundwave on YouTube, publishers aren't the easiest people to get a hold of. Even if there are B2B developer roles, they rarely return emails. How do we get through this?
Yeah, I think that's just the hard part, right? Because a lot of the publishers are extremely busy. They get like, I think even Joshua said it 2 weeks ago in this podcast. My email inbox is a demon I'm trying to slay every day. So it's most of the publishers receive between 10 and maybe 200 pitches a day or a week. I don't know, a lot at least. So it's very hard for them to provide an answer in return, specifically because a lot of them really feel the need. Okay, if I give a reply, I want to give a useful reply, and that takes a lot of time, and then it gets postponed, and then it might not happen at all. And to get a hold of them, it's probably the best thing to do, and that's why the events are important. Is to the smaller events as well. It's somehow make sure that you can establish a relationship, but also try different channels. So if you have tried email and you don't get a response, maybe try a LinkedIn, maybe try Twitter, find them on Discord, try to find different channels. Don't spam them, but at least like every week or every 2 weeks you can definitely send them a message, especially send something new if you have a new update to share. But in general, I would say if you have made something amazing and they don't respond, then probably that isn't a fit. And if they don't respond and you haven't made something amazing, then maybe that's the last part is the reason, and they're just not interested yet. At least I would say we would like to get a hold of all of them, and that's why it's much easier when you have a brand name. So that's also one of the reasons that we tend to be able to help a lot of people, is that with the Meet to Match and the Representing Games brand, we and our personal brands, is that we reach out to people with like a name they recognize and a name they basically associate with quality. So if we send them an email, we often send something that's worth looking at, while a random developer that's reaching out might end up on a big pile with all the others, and that's just simply a hard process to get through. So the easiest tip is to maybe help find some outside help, and find other ways to build relationships first, maybe.
Yeah, definitely try different channels, but then also make sure you follow up too. That's the thing.
Hmm.
If someone sends me a submission and they send it once and then I never hear
Yeah,
from them again, I'm
yeah.
like, okay, we're how serious was this?
Hmm.
Um,
One more tip though, in that regard, is also to make things as easy as possible. So what I notice a lot is that there's no real call to action in certain emails. So there's not like, okay, if you are interested, let's have a meeting or something like that. In the end, there's no easy access to certain documents. It's a very how do you call that in English? So it's basically, well, let's call it not clear where they can find more information about you. There is not like a very easy link, or people share a link to a folder where you click on it and then you first have to request access or stuff like that. So make it as easy as possible. But everything you share with a publisher, just assume they are incredibly lazy. Basically, assume
yeah,
assume they are.
and that's not a
And
knock on publishers. That's just to make sure your stuff comes through
yeah,
clear. Yeah.
yeah. So make things as clear as possible. Let someone else check it if you want, just to make sure that whatever you can do in your email or in your message is like short, concise, easy to understand, easy to navigate. And if you send people a request, hey, do you want to meet me? We don't say like, please let me know a time you're available. Say share a Calendly link with them, or a different thing that basically lets them pick a time whenever it suits them best, because that's also easier, and that makes it unneeded for them to basically email back and forth to talk about availability and stuff like that. So whatever you can do to make things easy, that's probably a big plus to get attention from a publisher.
So I'll always use the Michael Scott explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old method.
Definitely.
The easier it can be. And that's what I've had people push back over the years. Not so much recently as it was when Calendly first came out. They're like, oh, it's so impersonal. And I'm like, yeah, because I want to spend 3 days bouncing emails back and forth on trying to figure out
and what
when to
happens
do
a lot,
meeting.
what I see happen a lot is then they share like 3 slots they are available over email, and then by the time the other one responds, already 2 of those slots are filled, and then you get a double booking, and it just doesn't work.
Yes.
Use a tool. Use a tool. They're there for a reason.
All right, so we're going to talk about how to get ready for a meeting momentarily, but I want to hit Andre's question here as well. So when you're doing, and this is like whether for your pitch deck or for prepping for a meeting or whatever, how do you find comparable games and how much they sold?
Basically, there are quite some tools, I would say, that are out there that that for Steam at least give you like an estimation based on the amount of reviews. You can try to dig into like reports about certain games or ask around with industry colleagues if someone might know someone that can tell you more about it. But it's quite hard, I would say, to find real good estimations on how much games made. Maybe you have some interesting insights on that, Jay.
It's easier on PC than it is.
Yeah.
PC's pretty easy to get close. Console a little more difficult, but you can typically just base it on whatever the PC side was.
Mhm.
Mobile is where it gets crazy because then you've got to go in and start buying access to things like data.ai and all of these wonderful platforms that are basically built for big publishers. And
Yeah.
so they cost shitloads of money. I mean, they are just ridiculously expensive.
On the other hand, I think the Google Play Store at least provides like an estimation or a range.
Yeah, it'll say,
amounts of
it'll
sales.
say how many times roughly it was
Mhm.
downloaded. And that's really about the best you could do. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you want to go out and either you're getting direct information from friends in the industry who had similar games, or you're going out and paying a bunch of money. But the reality is things like Steam Spy and Steam VB and, all those different sites, those are just as good to use as anything else because that's what we're using on the scouting side. That's what publishers are using on their side. So everyone knows there's no concrete answer that you're going to get. But if you're using the same tools they do to do estimations, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, you can like hire a really expensive outside what do you call market research agency or stuff like that, but that's just not worth your money most likely.
Yeah, I mean, for an indie team, that's
No.
going to be crazy expensive. And truthfully, some of those are using the exact same tools too. So
Mhm.
it's like there's only so much access to information that we even have anymore.
Yeah.
Since everything's gone digital, it was much easier back in the day at retail because we just all had MPD reports, but it wasn't. You can't do that anymore. Another one with regards to publishers reaching out to them. So Yobob on YouTube says, I get a lot of publishers that contact me through Discord, email, and Twitter. How do I know if they're a good fit? I get offered a 50-50 split most of the time for the publisher just doing marketing and community management.
I would say a 50-50 split if you don't get any development funding. It's kind of a hard one, but yeah, I don't know. We are not that focused on the negotiation side. So we when we work with developers, we most of the time, like once the connection is established, we more like turn into a sounding board and hand over control back to the studios themselves. So it's not my expertise per se. But what I would say to figure out if someone is a fit, it's mostly about starting the conversation. Of course, that's a good first part to figure out if someone might fit with you on a personal level, and then afterwards, the best thing you can do is talk with people in the industry, figure out if there are people that published games with them before, ask them to their opinion. If their opinion is positive, there's a big chance there might be something in there for you as well. If you don't see any successful games in their lineups, if you don't hear about any positive stories about them, then there might be a red flag there that you need to investigate further. But ask around. I would say that's the best way to tackle this. Don't do things on your own.
So, Yobob, we've just actually released a couple of online classes that can help, that goes through, okay, this is how you qualify that publisher. Give me 1 second and I will pull here. I'll just do the quick version. In terms of the deal terms. So I've done this a lot for 25 years. 50-50 split and the publisher is just doing marketing and community management is not unheard of. It doesn't mean it's a good deal because it's all going to come down to how good their community management and marketing is. Unfortunately, we are seeing a trend in the last year or so of publishers who go out and sign just a ton of games, like dozens of games, but they're not doing funding, or they're giving a very minimal amount of funding at all. And then they say, okay, we're going to do community management and marketing. But it's a situation where they do just a little bit, or they have a set thing that they do. And if the game doesn't take off and start getting traction on their own, they just kind of push the whole thing aside. They're like, okay, well, we're just going to go on to something else. And we've seen publishers recently too come in and say, well, if you get the funding, we'll publish it. We're going to basically sign a distribution agreement. That is a very, very dangerous prospect for a lot of developers unless you already have funding coming in from an outside source, because at that point you can't go to another publisher and say, hey, I need funding for this game, but this publisher over here already says they're going to distribute it. There's not a single publisher in the world that's going to do that deal. So a 50-50 split, it is not unheard of. And keep in mind, there is no right answer to this. It's like I've done deals in the last 2 years where the publisher started out getting 80% of the revenue and then it evened out. And then I've also done them where the developer started getting 80% of the revenue and it evened out. So it's a matter of sitting down and understanding what exactly they're going to do and if it's going to be worth 50%.
Yeah, definitely. You want to know their marketing plans before you sign anything in that region, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the super detailed marketing plan, just a high level of something that they're going to commit to, because that's actually a really good point, Klaas, because that's something in a deal like that where they're not putting down any money. You want to make sure that the agreement calls out exactly what marketing they're obligated to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the marketing is also money, sort of, right? Yeah. So it's you want to know the value that's going to provide, and don't. What I saw in the past is that like a game that had a publisher that, basically an agreement with some form of an investment marketing agency kind of thing, and they basically signed a deal that they would provide 300K in worth of exposure because they get like a short snippet inside of a movie that was released, and that movie did very, very, very bad. So there was like no exposure at all, basically, and they signed off revenue for that. So be careful, I would say, about those kind of sketchy sounding deals. But you mentioned something like, okay, they sign a publisher that signs with you only for distribution if you bring in investment from the outside sources. You would agree with me, I think, that if it's okay, it could be okay if the publisher is like, okay, I give you 1 million and I publish it for you if you find another million somewhere else. That's something that's worth considering, right?
I mean, yes, you've still got to make sure that you've got that other million coming in somewhere. And
of course,
truthfully, a publisher is not going to commit 100, a million or whatever it is to it until they know that there's another million, because otherwise they could be sinking $1 million in milestones into something that's only going to get half done, or it's not going to get done at all. So typically they're going to want to make sure that they know that other, you see it a lot with government.
No, of course. You want a letter of intent from them, but you can sometimes use that to basically find a project investor or something like that to find the other million. If it's a publisher that might be a perfect fit for your game, but simply doesn't have the budget to make it work, then that might be worth considering. Of course, I would prioritize finding a deal that's basically all in one, but yes, it could be an option if you have a hard time finding one.
I had another question in there, but somewhere in the coffee, I lost that one. So, all right. So from Facebook, hi, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. Game events and conferences are pretty rare, as well as getting a hold of developers and publishers, as most events are hosted overseas. And like Jay mentioned, it's quite expensive. Is there a reason for that? Greed. All right. Sorry. Klaas, you can answer that question.
I can answer that. So can you keep the question on screen somehow, because it was quite a long question. So it's yeah, well, basically, I would say there's a reason for it being expensive to go overseas. Yes, of course, because it's traveling a long time. But I think the African games industry is just not that developed yet. Maybe it's a little bit more on the mobile side of things, but especially in the PC console parts, it's very, very limited. And it's also the other way around. So a lot of the big publishers are actually in Europe, or in Asia, or in North America. So it's very hard to host like a big event in Africa and let everyone go to Africa, I would say. I think this is a question my boss from Meet to Match could answer really well, but I feel like there's just at the moment still like a misfit between where the people with money are and where the big companies making games are, and where current new talent is being developed in Africa, and hopefully that grows into something bigger. But that will take a lot of time. But it's still it's emerging. I would say I see especially in the mobile side, I see more over in the past like 1 year. But it's it takes time, I would say.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that's exactly why we do the indie game business conferences. So,
Exactly.
one, check that out. And two, if you've got a game to pitch, I mean, our passes for the meeting system at the indie game business ones are only $50. But if you have a game to pitch and that's even that $50 is outside of your range, that's perfectly fine. Send me a DM, send me an email. I'll give you a free pass. As long as you've got, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do the meetings until you've got a game ready to be evaluated by these publishers. But if you do, just I'll hook you up with a free pass, because companies in your position are exactly why we still do the online events, because we know not everybody can make it to GDC or Gamescom or E3 or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for those people that I would say is that there was a time when it's still there somewhat, but that there was like a GDC online part and a offline part. But it's just we noticed the last 2 years that those two things don't connect very well with each other, which makes sense. If you are at a big conference, you don't have the time to pick up your laptop and open a meeting and do the meeting online. But it might still be a good idea to somehow figure out who is there, to then later reach out to them to figure out if you can have a call with them after the event. So it might be worth looking into who is heading to GDC, to not meet them there, but to meet them later at a time when they have still have some time and did their follow-up activities for the big event or something like that. But especially the online events are, I would agree, Jay, a great place to be when you're starting out in a strange region. Strange is not the right word. A hard region to be in.
Which actually made me think of something. When you're reaching out to publishers, especially at a conference like Gamescom or GDC, where it's going to be so competitive for everybody's time.
Yeah.
One thing that I always do is I put my regular Calendly link in the invite. It's like, look, if you haven't got time to meet at GDC, just pick a time here and we'll meet outside of the conference or before the conference or whatever. But it goes back into what Klaas was saying earlier about making it easy for everyone. All right. So, question from Jacob on LinkedIn. How granular would you want details for marketing for an agreement? Would it be a general budget or broken down? What happens if they don't get a return? Should you be wary of being hit with debt if the campaign didn't take off?
I think this is better for you to answer, Jay.
Okay. All right. So how granular do you want it? You want it as granular as possible, but the reality is things are going to change. Social media may change or a trend may hit somewhere. So don't make it so absolutely 100% concrete that you actually get locked into a marketing plan that is just going to be doomed from the get-go at the beginning. But yeah, you do want to see as much detail as possible. You don't want to say, a bad version would be like, hey, so we're going to do some tweets and we're going to post a press release and then we're going to do some additional social media videos. That tells you all nothing.
I think you can compare it to your own development schedule, right? Before a publisher will actually invest in your project. By that time, you have to work out your whole development timeline with all your milestones and all your details about when you're going to do what and when will it be delivered and what do you need at what time. I think you can expect the same from the publisher. You should expect the same from the publisher.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got all this detail laid out, they should have something similar.
Yeah.
So what happens if they don't get a return? Should you be worrying of hit with debt? No, you will not get hit with debt. Any contract that you get from a publisher that says if it doesn't work out, you're going to be in debt to them is horseshit, and you should not sign that contract. The general rule is, and this is where I always recommend everybody starting. So if you have put in $500,000 into development, and make sure you are counting sweat equity at a reasonable rate for yourself. Don't go into it saying, oh, well, we've only invested $3,000 over the last 2 years in development because we had to pay somebody to do music or art or some random thing. No. All your hours all the way through. That's your development budget. Look at your development budget. Look at how much money they are committing both internally and externally to doing marketing, community management, and all that sort of stuff. And then that 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30 or whatever it is starts at that point. Who's got how much invested? That's where you need to get started. But no, you will. I haven't seen a contract in decades that would put the developer in debt. Although I did see them in
Well,
like
well,
long
you
ago.
have those kind of sort of publishers basically that provide you user acquisition money up front. I would say those kind of take your equity in your company or stuff like that. So
Yeah, but
it
I mean,
might.
they're still given money. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
user equity money is still money. But at the same time, if you're doing a mobile game and you've got somebody coming to you and saying, "Hey, we're going to give you user acquisition money," but you don't know what to do with that money
Yeah.
money is not worth a whole lot.
No, that's true. That's true.
You've got to have somebody that knows, what they're doing on that side. But no, you should never get hit with debt because the game didn't take off. The publisher needs to be taking the same amount of risk on it you are. If you ever encounter a contract that says you will take that debt, toss it in the trash immediately and don't work with that publisher. But other than that, yeah, you want to get as much detail as possible, but you don't want to, completely lock down something that may need to change or may evolve depending on how much development time you got left.
It happens with every plan, right? It's always you start with a plan and things change from the get go. But at
Everybody's
least
got a
see a
plan
good
until they get
plan.
punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
All right. So you have decided which publishers that you're going to meet with at GDC. You have emailed them, you have messaged them, or however, and you've got meetings set up. What do you need to do to start preparing for these meetings?
Well, I would say first of all, figure out who you're speaking with. So basically, check what they have made in the past, especially what they've made in recent times, to figure out if there's a way to basically tell them, okay, you've made this in the past. This is why my game fits in there perfectly. Also, it's a good way to break the ice as soon as you start the conversation. If you have done some research on the person you're speaking with or on the company you're speaking with, it's a great place to start and break the ice a bit and get the conversation going. But also afterwards, I would say be prepared to tell what you need to tell in about 50 minutes time, because assume that, especially when you go to a big conference, assume that they will or you will be 5 minutes late because you have to walk from one place to the other. So that also means that sometimes people will leave 5 minutes ahead of the end of the event because they want to walk 5 minutes to the other thing. Then you have 5 minutes of ice breaking or something like that, and then there's 50 minutes left to basically do the pitching, but not only the pitching but also to ask them your questions that you might have for them. So there's very little time. So I think the most important part for you is to remember is that the goal for an event is not to sell them your game at this stage. It's to sell them the idea that they basically want to be very excited to receive more information from you as soon as they are back from the conference and share it internally with their team to talk about it. That's what you're trying to sell here, and not your game or sign a deal. You will, I think, you will agree with me, Jay, that almost never a deal gets signed at a conference itself. It almost always happens later on.
I had one done.
You had
in
one.
in 25 years. I've had one happen. Yes.
So I would say the most important part about the meeting, the most important part that must be in there is show them why your game is fun. Show them what the personality / uniqueness of your game is all about, so they understand, okay, this is something different than it's already there. And be sure to tell them what you need, why you are talking with them, and ask them any questions that you really need to be answered at this stage. But that's about it. That's everything that's important. You want to make sure they leave excited. You want to make sure that if you run into them again, that they still know, oh, that was that guy I met earlier today. They had an amazing game. And everything you tell on top of that is like a bonus. But that's like the bare minimum, I would say. So it's actually quite easy. But of course, if you have more time, if you have a very structured pitch deck, go over all kinds of things and go in more in depth. Tell them about the whole development budget you need and why you need certain amounts. Tell them about the market analysis you have done and why you think it's a great fit in the market there, and why you are doing certain things great that others done as well, but also why you are doing something great that they haven't done yet. So tell them all kinds of basic things that should be in a pitch deck. We can go more in depth in that if you want, but I would say the most important part is make them excited. Make sure they leave excited. Make sure they remember you as soon as they see your email when they're back from the conference. And yeah, that's about it.
And keep in mind, you're going to have to send everything to them after the show anyway. And so,
Yeah.
because it's just reality, when you're seeing this many games in a row at conferences, you're not going to remember everything off the top of my head. I mean, I literally sit in green light meetings every Monday, and
Definitely.
one of our team pops a game up, and I'm like, "Hey, I remember seeing that." It's like I don't remember where I saw it, but I do remember seeing it, and something about it. So you don't necessarily, especially if you are short on time, have
Yeah.
to go through all your pitch decks one at a time. I mean, all your slides and all that sort of stuff. You're gonna have to send it all to them anyway. So,
Sometimes it happens that you somehow have the time to go through everything, and
well,
but
yeah, if you do, but yeah, you
yeah.
don't count on it.
But I would say it might be a good sign that you didn't had the time for it, because you probably spent some time with not basically talking about the whole pitch deck, but you stopped for a while at a certain place in the pitch, or you talked for about the trailer you might have shared. That probably means they had some very interesting questions and they really were intrigued by what you were telling at that point. So that's why it's important that you start with everything that's most important and then end with anything that might be less important. And I think the most important part, and maybe the difference in your pitch deck that you go to a conference with and the one that you send over later, is that the most important parts get taken care of first, and then if there's time left, you can go into other things. And
Yes.
and I would say, be sure that you still have that other information readily available. Be sure that you might have any detailed documents that you wanted to talk with them about it in the background opened, that if they ask a question that specifically goes into that you can quickly open it. But you also have to assume that there might be a chance that internet is not there, that you don't have any power anymore. So also be prepared for that kind of case. So basically be prepared to tell them in any way that you have something very exciting they should remember and that they want to learn more about as soon as they come home. I think that's the
Yeah,
most
do
important
not
part.
start a meeting when we only have like 15 or 20 minutes at a conference
Mm.
with a 18 slide deck about every single piece of concept art and
Oh
individual
no.
at your company. Show them the game, and,
Yeah.
and you're first, like Klaas said, you want to make sure that they're excited and they leave excited. But two, make sure you make a personal impression, because that's going to make so much more difference down the road.
And
Um,
I
but
think
yeah,
that's something
that
that's hard to
that
do in online
absolutely
meetings,
works.
I
All right.
would
So
say.
what was my next question? Um, okay, so what to do, and we covered this a little bit
Mm.
with what to do and what to expect during the meeting, but just to give a sense of some of the random things that you may not be prepared for, but you've seen in meetings, what are some of the situations that you might need to be aware of?
Well, I think the ones that I covered well. Give me an example. Is that I noticed that someone was pitching with like a big Alienware double power plug laptop, and they were walking around with it, and they wanted to show the build to everyone because they really had one of those games that you need to play to understand. But you can't do that if you end up in a meeting room without any plugs in the wall. So be prepared to for those kind of situations, that even if you can't show them what you wanted to show, that you at least have something prepared. Even if it's like bring a spare tablet with you with a video with a trailer on it that shows gameplay. Um, what are other things that might be? Maybe fill me in, Jay, if you have something that comes to mind.
Be ready to justify your budget.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of times that we'll sit there and somebody will say, "This is how much we need, and this is how long it's going to take," and it's like
Hmm.
mentally just napkin math that doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So be ready to justify it if it's on the high side. Be ready to justify it if it's on the low side. So the um, the other thing is keep your pitch tuned to who you're pitching to. It's like I had a developer at Gamescom last year who was apparently very used to pitching to investors. And so the first 3 or 4 slides were information about the market size of mobile games and I'm like, I already know this. That
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't need to cover this. So, investor meetings and publisher meetings are not exactly the same. So make sure that you've got what you want to talk about tuned into that particular thing, and also be ready if the publisher just says, okay, look, I've got like 5 minutes, show me the cool stuff. Make it easy, and however you've got your setup for the pitch, to get to that stuff, because he's like, I've been in meetings where even if we had half an hour, sometimes the developer wants to show me the build, but in order to do that, they have to get on a multiplayer server and coordinate with the developers back at their office, and you spend 10 minutes just trying to get online and trying to get everything set up. That's not what you want to do. You can show all that stuff later. Go and make sure that you've got all your stuff ready to make an impression, to get them excited, but be absolutely ready for, we only have 5 minutes because this person got here 10 minutes late and they have to go 10 minutes early. There's a lot of variation in what can happen. So it comes down to really being ready for as much randomness as possible.
Yeah, just have backups basically. So I also saw great meetings that you are describing in that regard to Jay. That basically the people that had a whole pitch deck prepared, but in the end the publisher just said to me, "Okay, just show me your build," and then we played the game for half an hour, and that was great. There was a great impression made. They said, "Okay, I don't need all the details right now. It was a great game to see. Share me everything later on, and then we'll dive deeper into this later on over a call." So also be prepared for what they might ask from you at the beginning. They might say, I prefer to be pitched this way. So be prepared for that. And I would say think about questions up front that they might ask to you. So the most important questions, I would say, you already mentioned the one related to the budget, Jay, to be sure to that you can talk about, okay, why do you need this amount? But also think about, let's say your game isn't like a full vertical slice yet. The questions I often see the most are questions related to that. So basically, you're currently at some form of playable, you want to move to a certain vertical slice, expect questions on basically every subject that's not full vertical slice yet in your eyes. But also use outside help for that. If you feel like, okay, maybe I'm not objectively looking at this right now, ask a colleague, ask a friend, ask someone that's a bit more objective than a close friend. Ask them what they would ask if they would be a publisher and will be looking at your pitch deck. So basically prepare ahead of time what others might be asking during the pitch session, I would say.
And so, yeah, to give you a little more clarity, so if you're meeting with a publisher, the questions that you need to absolutely be ready for are: what platform is the game on? What genre?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What does it compare to? And don't say some AAA game. If you're making a 3D action adventure, don't say, hey, it's we're going to do sales like Zelda, because you're not. Pick comparable games. So what platforms you're on, what genres, what are comparable games, what's your budget, what's your release date? Those are the 5 main things that you need to be able to articulate pretty quickly. Because in the publisher's mind, they're just going through and they're hitting check boxes. It's like, okay, this game is going to come out in Q2 2024, but we already have a full slate for early 2024, so this is not going to be a priority for me. That's the main stuff that you want to hit and be ready for.
Yeah, I kind of disagree on one part though, and that's the don't estimate yourself with AAA titles or big hits or something like that. You can do that, I would say, if you use it in a smart way, where you basically say, okay, I compare myself with this aspect of this specific hit, but I'm different in this specific aspect, or I combine this aspect from this game, from that game, from that game, and I add my own flavor to it through this or that mechanic or whatever that might be.
Yeah,
but as soon as you move into, if I wanted to be sure that everyone understood that. As soon as you move into estimations, sales, stuff like that, please leave them out and only use comparable titles. Not only in terms of amount of sales you realistically can expect, but basically also use studio size. If you can figure it out, use the studio side that worked on it. Use the similar type of budget that was used to make it. But you can then use maybe like a first pool of comparable titles, but you can also take some outside things to make like a secondary comparable title list of a certain game that might be I don't know, somewhat different from yours, but very similar in theme, to use that as to describe what kind of audience is also out there as like a secondary audience. That's something you can use. But yeah, like you mentioned, Jay, don't use them when the big titles, the big hits, don't use them to create expectations, because they won't believe you anyway.
All right, I can't believe we've only got like 5 minutes left. So all right, if you've got any more questions, and I know Dan's got one from Discord, pop them into chat real quick, and so we'll get them answered, because as you can see from behind Klaas, it's like late at night, and
but it's okay.
He has to get his beauty sleep in. So all right, so this is the Discord. So with regards to Microsoft and Game Pass, are those deals about counting the development budget? Are there any tips for them as a publisher, or do all the deals with Microsoft and Game Pass usually go through another publisher and not with them directly?
I would say both happen. But what we noticed in the past most of the time is that you basically talk with a publisher that they, before they sign a deal with you, that they going to talk with your game and might with some other games they're trying to sign as well. They go to Microsoft, hey, can we figure something out? Can you do a partial investment and we do the rest? But I would say there are also programs that Microsoft can invest in you directly. But you know more about that, maybe, Jay?
So it basically it happens both ways.
Yeah.
All the publishers that do console games are talking to Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo about doing things and getting on Game Pass, but you don't have to have a publisher to go in and go to Game Pass. You can talk directly to Microsoft's Game Pass team about that. And
it's quite a hard funnel to go into, I would say. It's not they're very impersonal. It's even for us, it might be hard to figure out the right person to reach out to. Sometimes they are a bit more responsive. Sometimes they will refer you to some sort of form of general form or link or whatever you have to fill in. It's not the easiest, I would say. But go ahead.
It's harder. They're harder to get a hold of than like a regular publisher, but they're easier to get a hold of than Nintendo. So there's that for you.
It also depends on your personal connections, of course.
Yeah,
you might know someone.
In all honesty, it's somebody that you could, on occasion, you can accidentally run into at GDC at some sort of event too. So, but it happens both ways. A publisher can get you into Game Pass, and they've probably got a better chance of doing it because it's the same way that agents and publishers look at games coming from scouts and consultants that they know it's been triaged. Microsoft's the same way. They know if X publisher is picking this up, then it's at least worth looking at. With regards to the budgets that they do, Game Pass is going to do their budgets based on estimated revenue that they think you'll see, not necessarily funding the development. In an ideal world, the development is going to, or whatever that budget they have is going to exceed your development. So you do have to go in realizing that, they're not going to come in and just flat out fund your game. I say it can't. It's going to have to be a 1 in a million chance, but yes, they would do it. They're going to be more focused on, okay, how much revenue is this going to bring us? And then they're going to make an offer based on that. For what it's worth, the teams that I have talked to, at least early on, I know it's getting a little, they're a little less, free with the money these days than they were when Game Pass first started. But overall, it seems to be a good investment for developers if they get on Game Pass.
Do you think that will change with the recent news?
Next
Jay?
one from Jacob. When you're talking about budgets, should you include marketing and user acquisition when looking for publishers, or keep it development focused?
Sorry, I tried to ask you a question, but now.
My thing did that. All right, ask your question again. Sorry, dude.
So I wanted to ask you about the Game Pass. Do you think anything will change in that regard now the news is out about the Game Pass not cannibalizing other sales kind of things that was recently announced? What do you think that changes anything?
It may temper a little bit from publishers, but the reality is that's not news to anyone who was already on the publishing side looking at Game Pass, because they see that data too. It would be extremely naive of someone to think that it doesn't cannibalize game sales in some way, shape, or form. But at the same time, at least, recently as a year and a half ago, there were several, publishers and developers that came out and said that their games actually made way more money than they had projected it would because it was on Game Pass as, a featured title for a little while. Because keep in mind, everything on Game Pass isn't there permanently. So it's very possible that someone signs on and, people still want to keep playing it after it goes off Game Pass. So
even me, there are a lot of games I played because of Game Pass. So
same here.
Yeah.
And there's some that I've gone on and bought additional content for afterwards too. So, it's going to cool down a little bit, but the reality, that's not necessarily news to anyone who was already publishing or had a game on Game Pass. So I don't think it's going to make that big a deal.
All right. I saw we had a question from Jacob. It was about yeah. Did
Alright.
you already say it? Go ahead.
Well, so when you're talking about budget, should you include marketing and user acquisition when you're looking for publishers, or keep the budget development focused?
Well, I would say the budget specifically, keep it out at always. So basically, the publisher is the one that's actually figuring out how much money needs to go to marketing and user acquisition. If you really want to say something about it, that's okay. But when you're talking about where you're basically displaying somewhere, I'm looking for this amount of money, I'm filling in a profile where you have to fill in a budget range or whatsoever, you're talking about development budget only. So focus on that alone. Unless you have spare time and have some really great ideas on how you want to market your game, you might are able to provide some insights in how you would market things or what avenues you see out there. But don't work out the whole marketing budget plan, because that's their job, and that's why you need them partially as well. So don't put it in there, I would say.
Exactly. I agree. 100%. All right. So, Klaas, any last minute tips on things to do or not to do in a meeting, as well as, real quick, how you follow up after the meeting? What do you do after the conference?
Well, so first one before, I would say when you reach out to a publisher, be sure to also make that part as easy as possible. Include some of the most important information. There are numerous times that I basically had a time where people reach out with, hey, do you want to meet here or there? And then they don't include any specific information. Be sure to already include at least like a short video and all the necessary information. And then I would say, as soon as you start following up, make things again as easy as possible. Don't worry about following up during the week itself already. They won't look at it anyway. So don't go in your hotel room at night during GDC or something like that, where you're already sending all the follow-ups from during the day. Unless you really like doing so, you can. But I would say wait until after the weekend and send everything then. What is more there to say? Basically, when you are at GDC, be sure to go to parties in the evening. Not because partying is fun, but because there are a lot of interesting people out there, either to learn from or publishers that you might didn't have the chance to meet during the day. It might be the right opportunity to talk with someone during the day, meet them again in the evening, and have a beer with them, establish that connection, and make sure that that is the reason they will remember you when you reach out in the week after. Is there anything else I can share?
You don't have to have a beer. Don't feel obligated to have a beer.
You don't have to have a beer. That's just the way we say it, right? Have a beer together. But it can be a tea. It can be a glass of water. It's all fine. There's no pressure there. But it's just drink something with them, or have something to eat, or stand next to each other and have a laugh. It's all fine. Especially,
at the end of the day, this industry is 90% run by relationships. And so just
Yeah.
hanging out, it's like last year at GDC, the day before it started, I went to a Frisbee golf tournament that one of the developers hosted. It was awesome. Actually ran into one of my old clients while I was there. I mean, it's all about, making yourself rememberable, building that little bit of relationship, because when a publisher's seeing 3,000-4,000 games a year, if two of them come through their system and they're like neck and neck on which one to choose, but they know you or remember you, you're going to get the nod. So it's as much about building a relationship with somebody as it is about pitching every single little aspect of your game.
Definitely. So I a couple of short ones I would say still. So basically start as early as possible, especially for GDC. Probably you need to be have been started like a month ago already, or maybe even longer. People's schedules fill up very fast for these bigger events, so be sure to start reaching out if you can, like 2 months ahead, maybe longer. I would say if the schedules allow it, schedule your high priority targets in like the middle of the conference. This way you can basically practice on the ones that weren't your highest priority, but you are also still fresh, and they are still fresh enough because they're in the middle instead of the end, that you get their full attention as well. And then is there anything else? I felt like there was one more thing I wanted to say just now.
Don't send me a GDC invite 2 months before the show, because my brain ain't even at GDC.
Yeah,
2 months before the show.
Be on their
But
radar.
I mean, you're not wrong, because
Be
it
on
does.
their radar.
I started getting
Yeah.
GDC questions like the 1st of January, the minute we were back
Mm.
from the holidays. And I'm like, no. We're
Yeah.
not doing this yet. It's just like, I just refuse. And then plus we have our conference coming up in between now and GDC.
Yeah.
So it's like GDC is not even going to get my full attention until after our event.
Mhm.
But yes.
Oh, one more thing, and that's
One
all
more
about be sure that you are easily findable, because either you might not have the chance to meet someone at GDC or a different conference because maybe that person that wanted to meet with you didn't attend after all. Be sure that you are easily findable. The number of times I had a game as a scout or as from the other perspective that I wanted to reach out to figure out if that might be interesting to work with or for a client or whatsoever, that I couldn't find anyone at all, no way in, no company name or no email anywhere, no LinkedIn profile, no Twitter whatsoever, or not an open DM option or whatsoever. Be sure that you are easily reached out to and easily findable. That's very important, I would say. So that's one more
And
tip.
if a publisher
Ross.
does reach out to you, for God's sakes, at least acknowledge it and follow up. That's the thing
Yeah.
that drives us nuts. It's like, hey, we're looking for a publisher, and we reach out, and it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we have one, or we can help you, and then it's like crickets. It's like, no.
Put your email in your social media's profile.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, content creators do that too. It's like, how are you gonna get the sponsor if no one can reach out to you and you got everything closed so nobody can message you? Oh.
All right, Klaas, this is your chance. What do you want to plug? Plug your pluggable.
What I want to plug is that we are still looking to, well, basically work with more people. So if anyone out there in the market is looking for like that external colleague that might can do the legwork for them, that might provide some expertise, some network, and some, I would say, recognizable brand that can reach out for you, bring you on top of the pile instead of ending up in the middle. We might be the right person to help you out. We are mostly working in the games with a budget range between 250K and like 5 to 10 million. PC console premium focused. But if there's anything outside of that or close to that, feel free to reach out anyways and to see if there might be any fit there. And let's pick up the conversation. Happy to talk.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
All right. Thanks so much, Klaus.
Do your thing.
Yes. Thank you, Tripwire Presents, for sponsoring us. You're amazing. Make sure, and if you're watching this and you just missed part of it, all these videos are on YouTube. You can just go through the LinkedIn. They're up there permanently. So make sure and check that out. And make sure and jump in the Discord. That's super important. Discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. And we're excited because the Indie Game Business Conference is coming up at the beginning of May. So indiegame.business, you can check it out. You can see the speakers. You can even put in an application to be a speaker. So thank you guys.
We pay our speakers.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Your time is valuable. We pay you. Thanks to our friends at Tripwire Presents.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. So we will be back next week. Hold on. Let me see if I can quickly figure out what we got going on next week. We have Celia Hodent coming up. I might have mispronounced her name. But yeah, go to the website. We'll get you all the info on what we're going to be talking about. Grab a ticket to our event. If you can't afford a ticket, DM me, email me, and I'll get you one. And with that, Klaas, thank you very much. I will see you in San Francisco, and you will probably get me sick. So
yeah, most likely.
Yeah. All righty. Bye, everybody.